Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest episode of Rich Sports Talk. I'm your host, Nolan Rich. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest content. If you're new to the channel, bash that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future content. Always join us in the live stream. If you want a super chat to jump to the front of the line, you easily can do that. And check us out wherever podcasts are available. So, a little bit of a change in the show today. Unfortunately, Dom C, who comes on this program a lot and does a great job breaking down the Senior Bowl and the draft, I was excited to get his opinions on a lot of players today, is having major technical difficulties. So again, hopefully he's able to fix that. Hopefully it's a minimal fix for him. So again, I feel bad that he was put in that position this morning. So again, I hope it's a quick fix, nothing major. So today I'm going to go through a really brief synopsis. Again, we'll talk about the New York Jets and certain players from the Senior Bowl. We'll do a much deeper dive with Dom later this week. Again, it's just been crazy with the weather and with the scheduling. But I wanted to give you a couple brief recaps and a couple key players that stuck out in Mobile who I think that could be on the New York Jets radar. And again, comment, super chat to jump to the front of the line. I think the big one for a lot of Jets fans, and again, because of this quarterback draft class, was Garrett Nussmeier. And Garrett Nussmeier, the big thing of the Senior Bowl was he was healthy. This was a player that we saw had a regression in 2025. It's a situation where you looked at the player, and there were two things that popped up. Number one, the injury with the abdominal now seems healthy, which is great in Mobile. But the second thing, which also really stuck out to me, and I'm curious how a lot of the scouts and a lot of the player personnel evaluating Nussmeier will look into this, is it was a chaotic situation at LSU. I think it is abundantly clear. But the thing is, when you look at Nussmeier's performance, went downhill this year, wasn't as productive as the previous year. I mean, this was someone who at the beginning of this process, many people thought could be one of the top quarterbacks selected. And now we're talking about a player where we're debating where his position in this draft was. And look, I think Nussmeier, there's a lot that people are going to like. Son of a coach. He's going to be very witty about the game again. Much beat you more with brains than brawn. A guy who, again, solid enough athlete, doesn't really wow you with his athleticism, doesn't wow you with the arm, but you can tell this is someone that can competently run an offense. The thing I worry about with Nussmeier is this with the Jets is this was someone that was in a chaotic situation last year and did not perform well in an environment like that. And let's be frank, the Jets are not exactly a smooth running operation right now. Now, the thing with Nussmeier that's going to be intriguing to me is the way the Jets draft board is. Because the Jets, as we well know, have 4 picks in the top 44. I don't think that Nussmeier should be one of those top 4 picks. The problem you run into is the Jets have an abundance of day 3 picks, but they don't have a 3rd round pick. I'm curious if Nussmeier, if the Jets really love him, do they trade out of pick 44, 33, recoup some assets, get a 3rd round pick, and take Garrett Nussmeier in round 3 or 4? And again, you also have to play the board. We see this a lot now. If quarterbacks don't go in round 1, they tend to go all the way to day 3. There's not a lot of day 2 picks. I think a lot of these teams are looking for starters that can make an impact, then dart throws on quarterbacks. I think it was well documented last year. I mean, Tyler Shuck goes round 2, but early round 2 to the Saints, who really didn't have anyone in their quarterback room. And then you also look, Jalen Milroe went round 3. And those are the only guys. Then you saw a massive drop-off until middle of day 3, where like your Shedeur Sanders and a couple of those other players went. And to me, Nussmeier, I could see him being a 3rd round pick. I could see his staff falling in love with him, looking at it. Well, it wasn't the player, it was the coaching staff in the situation last year. If I'm the Jets, I obviously don't love him with the top 44 picks, and I've discussed this a lot on this channel, as I just get the feeling the Jets are going to take a quarterback at some point. The question is when they're going to pull the trigger. Nussmeier, too, maybe, and I'm curious now with the Frank Wright pick. I think Frank Wright looks for more traditional, bigger quarterbacks, more of the cerebral quarterbacks. Like, is he going to fall in love with this kid, especially because he's going to be incredibly knowledgeable and be able to, I think, really communicate well with coaches? So I'm very curious to see where Garrett Nussmeier goes in this draft, and we'll see how interested are. Like, do the Jets bring him in for a top 30 visit? Do they go to his private workouts? Do they have a private workout? So that is something I think we're all going to keep track of as well. The Senior Bowl also is an interesting place because it's a place where you get an idea of certain players, or your intrigue peaks because you see guys that maybe didn't flash all season but flash these practices, and you go, did I miss something? Did I have to watch the tape? And an intriguing player in this Senior Bowl was Jaden Ott, the running back from Oklahoma. Again, production fell off of a cliff last year, but really had a big practice, made some big plays in the game. He's someone that I would tend to avoid if I'm the Jets. To me, right now, the Jets, they took swings last year, like on an Arian Smith, on guys that had the flash, on guys that maybe didn't have the quote production, and it really hurt them. Like, I feel like the Jets just need to get productive football players in the building. And to me, Ott is too much of an outlier. I mean, one guy I would look at, and I'm curious where he's going to fall, is Malachi Fields. I mean, this is someone that I think really would fit well with the Jets. I think he could be someone that we could see come off the board with one of those top 44 picks. I mean, was making plays, but the thing you love about him, what the Jets don't really have, is the size. He's a true outside receiver, 6'4", plays with that big body, would be, I think, a really excellent complement to a Garrett Wilson and his skill sets. So Fields is someone that really popped for me for watching him out there. I thought he was the best receiver in Mobile, and I think there's a chance you can hear his name be called one. Again, we see a lot of receivers, and the way the league has been trending, teams just need as many weapons as possible. Two other underrated players, and again, I'll get more into the weeds with Dom C later this week when he's not having technical difficulties. Again, that's why he's not on the show. So if you saw the previous title of this video, you're like, well, where's Dom? Well, Dom right now is probably calling tech support. He's got a lot of issues with his subs, but again, hoping for the best with him. Two players that I would be intrigued with the Jets are center. Again, I don't think this is a pressing need, but I could see this being addressed on day 3. I think they got a lot out of the center position last year. I think they really like Tippmann at right guard. They want him settled, but I could see them drafting a developmental center. And two guys I keep an eye on are Florida's Jake Slaughter and Miami's James Brockmeyer. I thought both were productive this week. I think they are guys that I would definitely keep an eye on if we move forward in the draft on day 3, especially if the Jets want to draft someone and maybe eventually develop them into a starter. Maybe not this year, but within the coming years. One guy that I think is going to be a fascinating player for a lot of teams, but I think the Jets also would be on this guy because from all indications, and again, nothing's in stone and this isn't written in ink, but from all indications, it feels like the Jets are going to the 3-4 with some of the comments that Harrison Phillips was making this week. In the personnel they brought in, I really think you're going to see a lot more 3-4 fronts from the Jets. And now again, when you say 3-4, so many of these teams do these hybrid fronts. They're going to do 4 down linemen. It's not going to be a 3-4 75% of the time. But I do think one trait that you're going to see the Jets look for is big size. And you see it. They got Brownlee, who's a bigger corner than what they had in Michael Carter in the slot. You look on the defensive line, they brought in Jawan Briggs, Harrison Phillips. Those are 2 massive dudes on that line. And I think size is going to be a big thing they're going to keep on. One guy that really stood out, and this is another benefit of the Senior Bowl, is to see how healthy people are. And that's the thing with football. Sometimes when you really look at the draft, one thing you have to really evaluate is getting good value. And I remember when the Jets drafted Bryce Hall many years ago. This was a player that probably was a guy that should have been called in the first 3 rounds, but he was injured in football that season and fell to the Jets in the 5th, and the Jets got good value. And you're wondering, can Darren Muji maybe do something along this with Caleb Banks from Florida? Now, Caleb Banks coming into the season was one of the most hyped defensive tackles. And I mean, you could see why. He was a 360-pounder at 6'6". Like, this is a creative character almost in Madden, who was able to get up the field, penetrate the line, was able to get upfield. And you thought this was going to be a massive year for him in Florida, but had a broken foot injury and was limited to 3 games. And then you see in Mobile that this kid is really healthy and unfortunately wasn't out there. Now, we always bring this, which is you have to check the medicals, have to see how well the foot's healed. But sometimes in football, we see it all the time. Like, you don't want to go with guys that have an extensive injury history, But there are guys that sometimes are going to fall in this draft because they were injured. There wasn't a lot of tape. And if you really like the 2024 tape and you believe he's healthy and you believe he's a fit in this defense, he's someone I would keep an eye on. I mean, this is a massive guy that can really get up the field. And you look at 360 pounds, that could be an ideal nose tackle if they're really going to a 3-4 system. In another position and player I'm keeping an eye on is Bud Clark. I mean, the Jets, it's clear they need a safety. I do think they're going to really address safety in free agency, but Bud Clark is someone that I really love the range. This is especially someone that can play the ball well, had an interception, a couple interceptions in practice, an interception in the game. And it brings some of this Jet defense that they don't really have, which is a guy that can find the football and make plays with the football in the air. And on this defensive side, I mean, this is a team that didn't have an interception last year. And when you look at the personnel with Stevens, A.Z. Thomas, again, was limited when we saw Jason Brown. I mean, these are guys that can cover. They're going to be physical at the line. They're especially going to be physical in the run game. But there is an element to their game where they're not great at getting the football. They're not able to track the football. Now, again, A.Z. Thomas was a rookie last year. Maybe we see a change in him into year two. Brownlee, of course, we only saw a couple of games first, so hopefully a bigger sample size. But with Brandon Stevens, we've seen a guy that has consistently in his career, good coverer, but not someone that's going to make a play on the football when it's in air. But again, we'll get Dom back in here in a little. We'll get Dom back here later this week. And again, I just want to give you some eyes for those of you who woke up this morning. We're expecting a really deep dive into Mobile. We weren't going to be able to get to this morning. And, I apologize for that, but I promise you we will get into a deeper dive. But that's pretty much a good sum up of a couple key players, a couple of key positions that I think the Jets are really going to need to focus on. Mobile. And again, it was tough because when we're talking about the Jets and the Senior Bowls, it felt like we were talking more about the offense and defensive staff than were the players. But those are my initial thoughts on the Senior Bowl recap. Again, we'll do a deeper dive this week. And make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss that. I'm your host, Nolan Rich, and this has been Rich Sports Talk. We will see you next time.